So how far away? Right there. And when I speak like this should be 45 degrees off axis. Now, some people advocate that this should also be 45 degrees up along the vertical from my chin, I think is where we were supposed to point it. Definitely isn't, obviously, 45 degrees above vertical. But this is where it's gonna live, for now anyway. Hi all. Today is Thursday, July 24th. It is 6:54 p.m. It is, full disclaimer right from the start, it is so hot in here. Oh my gosh. It's really hot in here, in my little blanket cave. I thought I was going to call it the bat cave, but I think it's going to be the blanket cave. I was a big, blanket and cushion and pillow fort builder when I was a kid. My brother and I. Epic. Hallways and rooms. We took up an entire room one time and turned it into a maze-like fort. I'm off topic. Anyway, it is really hot in here, in my blanket fort. I have a little thermometer for hiking, and right now it is saying that it is, okay, well, now I feel like a jerk. It's only 82. But it's a humid 82. So, you may see me sweating a bit, and that is why, because I certainly am. But anyway, so it is 6:55 p.m. and let's see, what have I done today? Oh my gosh, it's gonna drip into my eyes. For voiceover stuff, I listened to quite a bit of an audiobook. Both the story and the narrator are incredible. So I'm enjoying both, but I am paying attention to the narrator and how the narrator is reading the story and what are the choices that the narrator is making in how to deliver certain lines or give certain descriptions, etc., etc., etc. And pacing, all of that. And then I'm on, the story's great. So trying to self-teach in that way. And what else did I do? Not too much technically. I did get in here and sit down right in the middle of the day to do some stuff. It's too noisy in the middle of the day. I'm just going to have to come to terms with that. If that's my window of opportunity, I would probably end up having to do a lot of post cleanup work to get whatever I recorded passable. There's just a lot of sound. Cars going by, landscaping crews, lawnmowers, hedge trimmers, barking dogs, whatever, you name it. So I think this is going to have to be early morning when I get in here, or this time of the day, which is when it's starting to settle down and become quieter. So I got in here at noon, just discovered I wasn't going to be able to do anything. So now I'm back later on. Here I am. What am I wrestling with? I've got 3 samples up on ACX. And, I've got everything set up technically and ready to go. I've, practiced my readings and trying to improve my performances. I got some coaching. and the coach was like, yeah, you're definitely ready to start auditioning. So that's where I am. So I've been looking on ACX at projects that are available that are the type of project I want to do. I won't go into details on what that is. But I'm not finding like a ton, right? Like if my only criteria was fantasy fiction, any length, any price, as long as you need a female voice with an American accent, I'll give it a try. There would be thousands, tens of thousands of projects for me to peruse. But, I'm a little more selective right now in my criteria, and there isn't a whole lot. Not nothing, but not a whole lot. And that wouldn't be so much of a problem if it weren't for the fact that ACX is becoming inundated with AI slop. And you have to do some pretty intentional research on the author and their publishing history on Amazon to try and discern if it's a legitimate project or is this just another piece of AI garbage scam, basically. And I'm new enough to this world and to ACX that I do not feel confident when I am analyzing projects, trying to figure out if it's legit or if it's AI garbage. So that's been holding me back. That's where I am. So I'm not going to start auditioning right now. I need to reach out to some more people. I might reach out to a coach and just have like a brief conversation with them about it. And maybe they can give me some insights. But that doesn't mean, even though I'm not auditioning, it doesn't mean that I can't practice. Specifically, practice cold reading audiobooks. If I can improve, sorry, I'm a little, what is happening right now? Oop. Hold, please. Sorry about that. My mom called. All right. What were we talking about? We were talking about, I can still practice. So what I've decided to do, I'm trying to train up to narrate audiobooks. Let's make part of this project just reading an audiobook. And this would be like just cold reading my way through a book. Now, since this is a YouTube video, I can't read and post stuff that's copyrighted, legally or ethically, right? So it would have to be public domain books. Stuff like Treasure Island is public domain. Dracula is public domain. I believe Alice in Wonderland is public domain, but I'm not sure about that one. Recently, Winnie the Pooh became public domain, hence the horror movie that came out immediately afterwards. So weird. Anyway, stuff like that. But here's the thing. A lot of the Agatha Christie books are public domain. But here's the thing about public domain books. They're old, and the vernacular and the diction and the even the sentence structure sounds very specific and formal. It sounds very formal. It's a very formal way of speaking and writing. And I don't really have a problem sounding formal. I actually think I do a pretty good job of sounding formal. What I am still working on, I'm trying to change how I talk about things. Somebody pointed out to me that there's always a positive way to talk about stuff. growth mindset, right? So instead of saying that, like, I'm not good at sounding informal is something that apparently does not come very naturally to me, and I am still working on it. So going through all the public domain books that I can read my way through as part of this project, the one that I have settled on, we'll see if the speech is more informal or not, we'll find out, is actually a book that I know that technically I read this when I was a child, but I don't remember reading it as a child. I'm just familiar with bits of the story. So I am going to technically reread The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. But for all intents and purposes, this is going to be a cold read. Because I remember almost nothing about this book. There's a boy and a girl who become friends. I think the boy was like sick. She was kind of bratty, but got him to go outside, and then being outside in nature healed him. And there was like something about his father. Let's find out together, shall we? All right. One of the other things that I am also simultaneously working on is figuring out my mic levels in this new space. So when you are recording in Reaper, folks say, or actually, there's advice up the wazoo about that is totally contradictory. No matter what the question is, you'll get like 20 different schools of thought about the answer. But a lot of folks say that when you are recording, 6 inches or closer to your mic is generally the sweet spot for where you want to be. I think I'm actually further away from my mic than that. I might be 10 inches or so. And maybe as I start reading, I lean in. Who knows? But regardless, when you are talking, your audio levels should be falling between 12 and 18 decibels. If you get really loud for something, it should go up to like between 6 and 12. And when you are speaking softly, very quiet, maybe even like a hard whisper, it should be down around 24, between 18 and 24. So as I'm speaking, I'm sorry that I'm not looking at the camera, but I'm actually really closely watching my audio levels in Reaper, and I'm making some adjustments to try and bring the audio levels up. All right, so I'm talking loud now, and now I'm talking really quietly, very softly. I think this is where it needs to be. Oh, wow, there's big off-axis change. Wow, okay, I am definitely going to bring this back down again a little bit. Yeah, let's bring it down soft, 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 soft. Yeah, okay, here we go. This must be such a weird video for you to be watching, but you know what? This is what it really looks like. And that is what I wanted to capture, is like the authentic experience of this journey, this adventure, this exploration, this hobby that I am learning. And this is what it looks like. So we're going to do some practicing tonight. Let us read together The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Hodgson? By Frances Hodgson Burnett. All right. Let's start Reaper recording. And I am not going to do any punch and roll today. This is just a straight through cold read. If I do mess up, I will stop and start again. But no punch and roll. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Chapter 1. There is no one left. When Mary Lennox was sent to Miss... Oh my God, you guys, what is this name? Misselthwaite? Misselthwaite? Really? Who has a name? Misselthwaite. When Mary Lennox was sent to Misselthwaite Manor to live with her uncle, everybody said she was the most disagreeable-looking child ever seen. It was true, too. She had a little thin face and a little thin body, thin little hair, and a sour expression. Her hair was yellow, and her face was yellow because she had been born in India and had always been ill in one way or another. Oh my gosh. Is this not going to age well? Is there going to be like a horrible amount of racism in this book just embedded into the story? I will read with caution. Okay. Because she had been born in India and had always been ill in one way or another. Her father had held a position under the English government and had always been busy and ill himself, and her mother had been a great beauty who cared only to go to parties and amuse herself with gay people. She had not wanted a little girl at all, and when Mary was born, she handed her over to the care of Aya, who was made to understand that if she wished to please the Mem Sahib, she must keep the child out of sight as much as possible. So when she was a sickly, fretful, ugly little baby, she was kept out of the way. And when she became a sickly, fretful, toddling thing, she was kept out of the way also. She never remembered seeing familiarly anything. That is, see what I mean? Public domain stuff. She never remembered seeing familiarly anything but the dark faces of her Aya and the other native servants, and as they always obeyed her and gave her her own way in everything, because the Mem Sahib would be angry if she was disturbed by her crying. This is not starting out well. By the time she was 6 years old, she was a tyrannical and selfish little pig as ever lived. Oh, there's a turn. The young English governess who came to teach her to read and write disliked her so much that she gave up her place in 3 months. And when other governesses came to try and fill it, they always went away in a shorter time than the first one. So if Mary had not chosen to really want to know how to read books, she would never have learned her letters at all. One frightfully hot morning, when she was about 9 years old, she awakened feeling very cross, and she became crosser still when she saw that the servant who stood by her bedside was not her Aya. "Why did you come?" she said to the strange woman. "I will not let you stay. Send my Aya to me." The woman looked frightened, but she only stammered that Aya could not come, and when Mary threw herself into a passion and beat and kicked her... Really? She looked only more frightened and repeated that it was not possible for the Aya to come to Miss Sahib. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to read it again. I have to get over... There is a lot to unpack in this. She only looked more frightened and repeated that it was not possible for the Aya to come to Missy Sahib. There was something mysterious in the air that morning. What just happened? Am I still recording? I don't know. Weird. Okay. There was something mysterious in the air that morning. Nothing was done in its regular order, and several of the native servants seemed missing, while those whom Mary saw slunk or hurried about with ashy and scared faces. But no one would tell her anything, and her Aya did not come. She was actually left alone as the morning went on, and at last she wandered out into the garden and began to play by herself under a tree near the veranda. She pretended that she was making a flower bed, and she stuck big scarlet hibiscus blossoms into little heaps of earth, all the time growing more and more angry, and muttering to herself the things she would say and the names she would call Sadie when she returned. "Pig, pig, daughter of pigs," she said, because to call a native a pig is the worst insult of all. She was grinding her teeth and saying this over and over again when she heard her mother come out on the veranda with someone. It was with a fair young man, and they stood talking together in low, strange voices. Mary knew the fair young man who looked like a boy. She had heard that he was a very young officer who had just come from England. The child stared at him, but she stared most at her mother. She always did this when she had a chance to see her, because the Mem Sahib, Mary used to call her that oftener than anything else, was such a tall, slim, pretty person, and wore such lovely clothes. Her hair was like curly silk, and she had a delicate little nose which seemed to be disdaining things, and she had large, laughing eyes. All her clothes were thin and floating, and Mary said they were, quote, full of lace. They looked fuller of lace than ever this morning, but her eyes were not laughing at all. They were large and scared, and lifted imploringly to the fair boy officer's face. "Is it so very bad? Oh, is it?" Mary heard her say. "Awfully," the young man answered in a trembling voice. "Awfully, Miss Lennox. Awfully, Mrs. Lennox. You ought to have gone to the hills 2 weeks ago." The Mem Sahib wrung her hands. "Oh, I know I ought," she cried. "I only stayed to go to that silly dinner party. I was a fool." At that very moment, such a loud sound of wailing broke out from the servants' quarters that she clutched the young man's arm, and Mary stood shivering from head to foot. The wailing grew wilder and wilder. "What is it? What is it?" Mrs. Lennox gasped. "Someone has died," answered the boy officer. "You did not say it had broken out among your servants." I did not know," the Mem Sahib cried. Come with me," and she turned and ran into the house. After that, appalling things happened, and the mysteriousness of the morning was explained to Mary. The cholera had broken out in its most fatal form, and people were dying like flies. The ayah had been taken ill in the night, and it was because she had just died that the servants had wailed in the huts. Before the next day, 3 other servants were dead, and others had run away in terror. There was panic on every side, and dying people in all the bungalows. During the confusion and bewilderment of the second day, Mary hid herself in the nursery and was forgotten by everyone. Nobody thought of her, nobody wanted her, and strange things happened of which she knew nothing. Mary alternately cried and slept through the hours. She only knew that people were ill, and that she heard mysterious and frightening sounds. Once she crept into the dining room and found it empty, though a partly finished meal was on the table, and chairs and plates looked as if they had been hastily pushed back when the diners rose suddenly for some reason. The child ate some fruit and biscuits, and, being thirsty, she drank a glass of wine which stood nearly full. It was sweet, and she did not know how strong it was. Very soon it made her intensely drowsy, and she went back to her nursery and shut herself in again, frightened by cries she heard in the huts and by the hurrying sound of feet. The wine made her so sleepy that she could scarcely keep her eyes open, and she lay down on her bed and knew nothing more for a long time. Many things happened during the hours in which she slept so heavily, but she was not disturbed by the wails and the sounds of things being carried in and out of the bungalow. When she awakened, she lay and stared at the wall. The house was perfectly still. She had never known it to be so silent before. She heard neither voices nor footsteps, and wondered if everybody had got well of the cholera, and all the trouble was over. She wondered also who would take care of her now her Aya was dead. There would be a new Aya, and perhaps she would know some new stories. Mary had been rather tired of the old ones. She did not cry because her nurse had died. She was not an affectionate child, and had never cared much for anyone. The noise and hurrying about and wailing over the cholera had frightened her, and she had been angry because no one seemed to remember that she was alive. Everyone was too panic-stricken to think of a little girl no one was fond of. When people had the cholera, it seemed that they remembered nothing but themselves. But if everyone had got well again, surely someone would remember and come to look for her. But no one came, and as she lay waiting, the house seemed to grow more and more silent. She heard something rustling on the matting, and when she looked down, she saw a little snake gliding along and watching her with eyes like jewels. She was not frightened, because he was a harmless little thing who would not hurt her, and he seemed She was not frightened, because he was a harmless little thing who would not hurt her, and he seemed in a hurry to get out of the room. He slipped under the door, as she watched him. "How queer and quiet it is," she said. "It sounds as if there were no one in the bungalow but me and the snake." Almost the next minute she heard footsteps in the compound, and then on the veranda. They were men's footsteps, and the men entered the bungalow and talked in low voices. No one went to meet or speak to them, and they seemed to open doors and look into rooms. "What desolation," she heard one voice say. "That pretty, pretty woman. I suppose the child, too. I heard there was a child, though no one ever saw her." Mary was standing in the middle of the nursery when they opened the door a few minutes later. She looked an ugly, cross little thing and was frowning because she was beginning to be hungry and feel disgracefully neglected. The first man who came in was a large officer she had once seen talking to her father. He looked tired and troubled, but when he saw her, he was so startled that he almost jumped back. "Bonnie!" he cried out. "There's a child in here! A child alone! In a place like this! Mercy on us! Who is she?" "I'm Mary Lennox," the little girl said, drawing herself up stiffly. She thought the man was very rude to call her father's bungalow a place like this. "I fell asleep when everyone had the cholera, and I've only just wakened up. Why does nobody come?" "It's the girl no one ever saw," exclaimed the man, turning to his companions. "She's actually been forgotten." Why was I forgotten?" Mary said, stamping her foot. "Why does nobody come?" The young man, whose name was Barney, looked at her very sadly. Mary even thought she saw him wink his eyes, as if to wink tears away. "Poor little kid," he said. "There is nobody left to come." It was in that strange and sudden way that Mary found out that she had neither father nor mother left, that they had died and been carried away in the night, and that the few native servants who had not died had also left the house as quickly as they could get out of it, none of them even remembering that there was a Missy Sahib. That was why the place was so quiet. It was true that there was no one in the bungalow but herself and the little rustling snake. That was chapter 1 of The Secret Garden. All right, how long have I been reading for? About 14 and a half minutes, 15 minutes. So, I think I'm going to stop the video. I might keep reading, but I'm going to stop the video here. All right, so this is day 4 of my 30-day VO summer project. What a mouthful that is. I should have named it better. I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to stop my recording in Reaper and check the levels. All right. If you have feedback to give on the audio quality or feedback to give on the narrative performance, feel free to do so in the comments. All right, until next time.